In the upcoming PTB, Behavior is making a huge change to Dead by Daylight, where Haste and Hinder effects will no longer be able to stack with themselves, meaning Haste can still be comboed with Hinder and vice versa, but you can no longer stack Haste on top of Haste or Hinder on top of Hinder. This change affects an enormous amount of different things and builds within the game. It's honestly going to take a while to even unpack all of the ripple effects from this when considering things like perk combos, killer power interactions, add-ons. There's a lot. Now, I'll voice my opinions on this at the end of the video, but for right now I want to focus on what Behavior said here, introducing small buffs to perks which previously relied on stacking. Now, I find this very interesting, so in this video we're going to quickly go through all of the Haste and Hindered perks for both Survivor and Killer to see which perks are most likely to get changed and how they should be changed with this new limitation coming into effect. And we won't have to wait long because the PTB comes out in only a few days. So let's first start off with Killer Hinder perks. Hinder meaning perks that slow down Survivor movement speed. There's only 3 of them, which actually caught me a little bit by surprise. Now, I'm not going to read all the descriptions of the perks. I'm just going to go straight in and say kind of what I think should happen with them. Forced Hesitation, in my opinion, is one of the strongest and most underrated killer perks in the entire game, so it definitely doesn't need any changes. Moving on, we got Hex Nothing But Misery. Now, this is the new perk from the Ghoul, and in my opinion, even in its current state, it's pretty bad. The only value it really has is with stacking, so they definitely need to bump this up. I would say because of the fact that it's a hex totem and it has a condition to even activate in the first place, it can definitely go up to like 10%. If it's a little bit too strong at that point, then maybe they could bump it down to like 8% or 7%, but 5% as it is right now is just way too pathetic. Lastly, we have the reworked Knockout. Now, this perk is really bad. I mean, it's pretty much gutter tier. Again, I think the best option here is probably to increase the Hindered to 10%. That way the Survivor doesn't get as much distance while you're breaking the pallet, because a lot of the times this perk is going to come into effect when you're dealing with pallets that pretty much have to be broken and the Survivor tries to shift W to the next pallet. So I would definitely go to 10% for 5 seconds. That doesn't seem like it would be that over the top, but still not pathetic enough that you could potentially get some value with certain killers. Now, moving on to Haste, we definitely have a few more perks. So let's start with Batteries Included. Batteries is 100% one of those perks that needs to be stacked to get value. It's usually stacked with things like Noet for endgame builds, as it gets most of its value in the endgame. So this definitely needs to be buffed. Considering it's only 12 meters, I don't think that 10% would be that egregious. Again, it cannot be stacked with any other haste effects. So normally something like this might be stacked with like play with your food. And I really don't think that 10% within 12 meters of a generator is going to be that significant, but still significant enough to where the perk has value. Again, remember these perks, if they don't have value, they're just never ever going to get used. So it's kind of up to you to decide, well, is the perk just better off dead, or should we try to buff it to where it still has some value? Leaving it in a state like this where it's only 5%, it's just worthless. So you'll never see it again. Now we have Furtive Chase. To be honest, the haste aspect of this perk is fine. I think they just need to increase the amount of time that you have with the haste effect in order for this perk to still stay valuable. Game of Foot, in my opinion, is actually fine because in reality, you don't really use this perk for the haste anyway. You use it for obsession builds, so I think this one's totally fine. Devour Hope, again, you're not using Devour Hope for that pathetic haste effect anyway, so totally fine. Machine Learning gives you enough haste. It's just a fundamentally poorly designed perk and probably needs to be reworked in some way because you literally give up gens on purpose, which is, it's just very awkwardly designed. And you almost work against yourself to get value out of this. It just needs basically a rework in general, but the haste is definitely fine on its own. Doesn't need any adjustments in that department. Rapid Brutality. Rapid Brutality needs a buff. The issue here is actually the timing on it. I think the 5% haste is fine, but the 10 seconds is too pathetic, and people have actually tested this in videos and shown just how little of a difference it actually makes having this perk in comparison to just base kit. So it needs like something like 15 seconds just to account for the fact that you need to like clean off the weapon before you continue the chase. Again though, the haste, the actual speed is fine. Shadowborn, again, a not a very good perk at all, but the 10% haste is fine. It's the time that you have the haste that's the issue. But in this video, we're kind of just talking about, does the haste itself need changed? And in this case, it doesn't. Unbound is 100% a combo perk. It's by itself, it's very pathetic. The thing is that it combos more with vault speed builds than it does with haste builds in particular. But even then, since it cannot combo with any other haste effects anymore, I think it would be totally fine to bump this up to something like 7%, just to give you a little bit more out of it. Moving on to agitation, this perk is totally fine. 18% is more than enough. Nobody ever used stacking perks with agitation. It's a completely independent perk. Onto Noed. Now, Noed, you get a 4% movement speed buff while the totem's up. It seems weird saying that Noed could be buffed a little bit, but with things like old combos having batteries included in Noed, maybe they could go up to 5% with Noed, but realistically it's Noed. It's still an extremely strong perk on its own, so it doesn't need to be touched, in my opinion. Lastly, we have Play With Your Food, which definitely leaned into a lot of meme builds. I've seen a lot of meme builds with Play With Your Food. But to be honest, Play With Your Food is a good perk. It doesn't need any kind of increase to the speed itself. Other changes should be made to it maybe, but in my opinion, the speed is pretty much right on point where you'd want it. So overall, I don't think there actually needs to be that many adjustments to Killer when it comes to Haste and Hindered. It's more like, how is it going to work with certain add-ons and killer powers like my boy Clown here. Now let's move on to Survivor Hinder perks. Much like Killer, Survivor also has 3 hindered perks, starting with Champion of Light. This is a really good one. When you're shining a flashlight, you have 50% haste, so it also comes with haste as well. It's like built in. They definitely don't need to buff anything about Champion of Light. It's extremely good, and it's why you see it in the meta. Then we have Vigil, which actually affects the amount that you're hindered by 40%. Again, Vigil is already massively overbuffed, so it doesn't need to be buffed any more than it is right now. I would say it's in a too strong of a spot, so it doesn't need to be buffed. Let's put it that way. Lastly, we have Chemical Trap. Chemical Trap is in a totally fine place. There might be some other things about the perk they could tweak a little bit when it comes to, you know, getting more chemical traps or whatnot. But to be honest, the hindered is totally fine on this. They do not need to increase the hindered effect. 50% is very heavy on its own. Now we have Survivor Haste perks. And I think this is probably where a lot of the problems arise when it comes to why Behavior is making this change in the first place. There are just a lot of Survivor Haste perks. So let's get into it and see what might need to be buffed with this no stacking change coming to the game. Now, Babysitter is a little bit interesting because survivors already get a haste effect on base kit when they get unhooked. So this perk is going to have to be altered at least in some way. My assumption is that the haste effect from the perk will not activate until the base endurance effect wears off. But other than that, they definitely do not need to buff Babysitter. It's already an extremely strong perk. Blood Pact. This perk is in a totally fine spot, I guess. It's always very memey to begin with, and sometimes you'll see it comboed with Teamwork Power of 2 so that you get like the benefits of both perks together at the same time. That said, I don't think anything really needs to happen to Blood Pact. You know, it is a meme perk for sure, but 7% haste is really strong as it is. So they may as well just keep it. And then when we get to Power of 2, we'll talk a little bit more on what they should be doing with that perk, but Blood Pact is fine. Boon Dark Theory. This one's definitely a point of contention. I've seen it brought up multiple times already because the 2% haste effect seems very, very pathetic, especially when you consider it can't be stacked with anything anymore. Remember, it's only a 24-meter range. Now, in my opinion, does Boon Dark Theory need buffed? I do believe it needs buffed, but there's a little bit of a caveat to it because boons in general have a very broken effect right now, which is that the problem with boons in general is that their effect can cross multiple vertical floors, which is very, very broken in a lot of maps. Like literally with the right setups, there is just nothing a killer can do against boons. So Behavior needs to remove boons working on vertical floors in order to buff Dark Theory. If they buff Dark Theory, but you could, for example, place something like RPD and hide this boon upstairs or downstairs somewhere in a corner corner and then run around the top side of it with some like ridiculous movement speed bonus, that's going to be pretty much unbeatable if you're not looking S tier killer. So this one's very, very delicate, and they can buff it up to like 3% or even maybe 4% because it's only 24 meters in range, which is very small. But again, if they're going to do that, they have to get rid of boons working on multiple floors. It's literally game breaking. So I hope they consider that. Next up, we have Breakout, which just a little side note on Breakout. As far as all survivor perks go in the entire game, Breakout has the highest loss ratio, or at least the highest death ratio per user. So if you're running a Breakout build, statistically speaking, you're probably going to die. That said, I actually think the perk is 100% fine how it is, and it does not need to be buffed in any way. People do not run Breakout to stack it with other haste perks. They stack it with Sabo perks. Next up, we have Buckle Up, which is already at 50% haste. You pretty much don't see anybody run this perk because in practical terms, there's better options that we'll be getting to within this same list. But yeah, 50%, I'd say that's definitely fine. They could bump it up to like even 100% for 5 seconds if they wanted to. It's really not anything crazy. It's like a sprint burst. 50% is more than enough, and it's still a really good perk for anti-slugging. Champion of Light we have again, obviously, so we'll just go ahead and skip that. Dramaturgy. Dramaturgy, totally fine, not used for haste stacking, just keep it as is. Hope, this is one they actually referenced in the post, so we can pretty much guarantee that they're not going to be making any changes to Hope. 7% is insanely strong. Yeah, Hope 100% does not need to be touched. It's a super strong meta perk and has one of the highest escape rates of all perks in the entire game. No One Left Behind is 100% fine with the 10% haste. Again, they just kind of have to look into how that works now with the when this combos with the base kit haste as well. Plot Twist is 100% fine because nobody uses this perk for the haste effect. They use it for the heal, so totally fine. Teamwork, Power of 2. The only value of this perk ever existing was comboing it with Blood Pact. Now, the thing is you could say, well, now that it can't be comboed with Blood Pact, shouldn't we buff it? And the answer is no, because if you buff this perk, it's essentially just Blood Pact. So either buff this perk and rework Blood Pact, or keep Blood Pact how it is and rework this perk. There's just no reason to have two perks in the game that essentially do the same exact thing. And now that you can't combo them, there's quite literally no reason to do it. So one of them just needs a full rework. Adrenaline, super meta, doesn't need any changes. It's in an absolutely perfect spot. Background Player, I think Background Player is finally in a pretty decent spot in terms of how fast you move. So this one can stay as is, no changes. Balance Landing is bugged at the moment, but that has nothing to do with the numbers. I think most of the standard exhaustion perks like this are totally fine, definitely do not need to be buffed. Borrowed Time, much like Babysitter and No One Left Behind, needs to be adjusted a little bit in terms of like how it works with the base kit unhook, but the speed is perfectly fine on its own. Lithe, just like Balanced Landing, 100% fine. Made for this, although in my opinion, a very over buffed perk still. Essentially, it's two perks in one. Like, it does not need to give you the endurance status effect after healing another survivor. I'd much rather something like that be moved to a perk like Reactive Healing that has like a 0.1% pick rate, and then leave the standard Deep Wound Run 3% faster effect, which is already just extraordinarily strong and does not need a second perk basically built into it. Like I said, it would be much better on something else. But that said, the 3% is fine. It hurts certain killers a little bit. I know everybody right now is running it to counter Ken, which I understand, and against Ken it makes sense, but against other killers like, you know, Legion, for example, it can be a bit egregious. I kind of think Made for this will solve itself once, you know, the devs inevitably nerf Ken. So I wouldn't make any hasty judgments on that, and I would just keep it with the 3%. It definitely doesn't need a buff. Smash Hit, one of the better designed perks in the entire game, definitely doesn't need any changes. And lastly, Sprint Burst. Sprint Burst is probably the strongest survivor perk in the entire game. Hot take, I know, but definitely doesn't need any buffs. So with that, we have all the perks, and not an insane amount of changes need to be made to the perks now that I've seen them all, but there's obviously a lot more to the story when you take in like killer powers and add-ons and all of that stuff. Now with that said, again, the PTB comes out on the 15th for anyone who wants to jump in and play with me. I will be doing open lobbies so we can test a lot of this different stuff out. Now moving on to what I think about this change. I understand from a balance perspective why Behavior has chosen to do this. There's more and more variables within the game, thousands of combinations, and at some point it becomes too messy to leave something like this unchecked. So I do understand why they made this choice. That said, there are some real issues here, and this is again another piece of evidence that DBD should adopt my currency system instead of attempting to manually balance everything themselves. That said, let's first address what this change does to the game in practical terms. Right now, if I want to run a meme build as killer that gives me a bunch of movement speed buffs or haste, I have to dedicate multiple perks to do that. And I'm not gonna lie, that seems like the healthier option, because if Behavior implements these new limitations, there's pretty much only two outcomes. Either a perk dies because it's simply not good enough to exist on its own, or the perk becomes very strong and thus becomes meta. And having a movement speed based perk become meta is very dangerous, because it's one thing when someone is dedicating an entire build to get some meme level movement speed, but when it's no longer a meme and they can run that singular perk with 3 other meta perks like gen defense or whatever it might be, it actually starts to become a bit of a problem, and you get into muddy waters that sort of mimic Skull Merchant 2.0, where she beats you at a loop because movement speed. So this definitely runs the risk of becoming very boring and uninteresting to play against, but also very strong as well, which is the key difference. Of course, alternatively, these perks could just all die, which would be equally sad. This definitely feels somewhat like Behavior is setting themselves up for a lot of future problems, whereas the currency system would have effectively done the same thing in a much more elegant way, and it wouldn't have removed a bunch of fun meme builds from the game permanently in favor of milquetoast balance. Speaking of milquetoast balancing, this is setting the precedent for future changes to come to the game, so expect to see things like ultimate volt speed meme builds get removed because you're not allowed to combo them anymore, potentially healing speed builds. There's just a lot of potential watering down of the game coming in the near future when it comes to creating builds. This is why the currency system actually preserves fun variety in the game, which is ironically the biggest counter argument I hear against it. It's like this is literally reality staring you in the face, proving that manual balance is what's going to kill variety, not a well implemented currency system. But regardless, this is the direction Behavior has decided to go, so I guess let's see how it plays out. I'm curious what you all think about it. Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thanks so much for watching and have a good one, except clown mains, because you're pretty much fucked.